Welcome back, everyone. If you're just joining us, you're in for an emotional story of family, greed, and justice. In the last part, Emma discovered that her own mother secretly tried to sell Grandma Eleanor's grave, believing the dead don't need anything. The living do. But Grandma had anticipated this betrayal years earlier and legally transferred ownership of her burial plot to Emma. When Patricia challenged the decision in court, a powerful video message from Grandma exposed the truth and changed everything. Now, let's continue with the unforgettable conclusion of this incredible story. Emma had always believed that some places deserved silence. Every Sunday morning, without fail, she carried fresh white lilies to her grandmother Eleanor's grave, tucked beneath an old oak tree in the town cemetery. The quiet path, lined with weathered stones and blooming roses, felt like a bridge between the past and the present. Eleanor had raised Emma after her father passed away and had filled her childhood with kindness, bedtime stories, and lessons about honesty. Even after Grandma Eleanor died 5 years earlier, Emma kept her promise to visit every week. She would clean the headstone, replace faded flowers, and sit beside the grave sharing the events of her week as though her grandmother could still hear every word. Her mother, Patricia, never came. Patricia had always considered the cemetery a waste of time and often mocked Emma's tradition. "The dead don't know you're here," she would say. Emma ignored the comments because honoring her grandmother meant more than winning arguments. One rainy afternoon, Emma received an unexpected phone call from the cemetery office asking if she had authorized the transfer paperwork for Eleanor's burial plot. Confused, she insisted she had signed nothing. The manager hesitated before explaining that someone claiming to be the legal next of kin had requested permission to sell the family plot to another family because space in the cemetery had become scarce and valuable. Emma's heart pounded as she asked who had filed the request. The answer froze her in place. It was Patricia. Shock turned into disbelief as Emma drove straight to her mother's house. Patricia greeted her casually, sipping coffee as if nothing unusual had happened. When Emma demanded an explanation, Patricia shrugged without guilt. "It's just land," she replied. "The dead don't need anything. The living do. Someone offered a fortune for that location, and I could use the money." Emma felt tears burn in her eyes. "That's Grandma's resting place," she whispered. Patricia rolled her eyes and claimed Eleanor would never know the difference. Emma reminded her of every sacrifice Grandma had made for both of them, paying bills, raising Emma, and even helping Patricia through difficult years. Patricia dismissed it all, insisting sentimentality would never solve financial problems. Emma stormed out, unable to believe her own mother could speak so coldly. That evening she returned to the cemetery and knelt before Eleanor's grave. Looking at the engraved stone, she promised through tears that she would protect it no matter what. As she stood to leave, the cemetery caretaker approached quietly. He admitted he had delayed the paperwork because something about Patricia's behavior had seemed suspicious. He also revealed that Eleanor had visited the cemetery months before her death with a lawyer and had updated several legal documents. The caretaker did not know the details, but he suggested Emma speak with the attorney whose name appeared in the cemetery records. The next morning Emma visited the old law office downtown, where the elderly attorney welcomed her warmly. After hearing her story, he opened a locked cabinet and removed a sealed envelope bearing Eleanor's handwriting. It was addressed specifically to Emma and marked, "To be opened only if someone ever tries to disturb my resting place." Emma's hands trembled as she carefully broke the seal, wondering how her grandmother could possibly have anticipated such a heartbreaking betrayal. Inside the envelope rested a handwritten letter and a certified copy of Eleanor's final estate amendment. Emma began reading slowly, her grandmother's familiar words filling the quiet office. Eleanor wrote that love should never be measured by money and that true character would always reveal itself when greed appeared. She explained she had worried Patricia's financial recklessness might someday tempt her to profit from the family burial plot. To prevent that possibility, Eleanor had legally transferred all rights to her grave, memorial, and surrounding family plot directly to Emma before her passing. Emma looked up in stunned silence as the attorney nodded gently and said, "Your grandmother planned for this day. And she made sure you would have the final say." Emma sat motionless in the attorney's office, gripping her grandmother Eleanor's letter so tightly that the paper trembled in her hands. Every sentence felt like a conversation from beyond the grave. Eleanor explained that she had never stopped loving Patricia despite her poor decisions, but years of broken promises, mounting debts, and selfish choices had forced her to prepare for the worst. She hoped Patricia would eventually change, yet she refused to let greed erase the dignity of the family's final resting place. The attorney then handed Emma the official documents proving that Eleanor had legally transferred ownership of the grave, the memorial, and the adjoining family plots exclusively to Emma several months before her death. The paperwork had been properly witnessed, notarized, and recorded, leaving no room for dispute. A sense of relief washed over Emma, but it was quickly replaced by anger. Her own mother had knowingly attempted to sell something that no longer belonged to her. She thanked the attorney for safeguarding the documents all those years and promised that her grandmother's wishes would be honored. Before Emma could leave, the attorney revealed another unsettling detail. Patricia had visited his office 2 weeks earlier pretending she had misplaced some estate papers. She had asked several suspicious questions about ownership of the cemetery plot, but when the attorney refused to discuss confidential matters, she left looking frustrated. Emma realized that her mother had probably suspected the ownership had changed and was trying to find a way around it. Determined to stop her, Emma immediately drove back to the cemetery and showed the manager the legal documents. The manager carefully reviewed every page before smiling with relief. He explained that Patricia had been pressuring the cemetery staff almost daily, insisting the sale be completed immediately because a wealthy family wanted the premium burial location. Thanks to the caretaker's instincts and the missing verification, the transfer had never been finalized. The manager officially cancelled Patricia's application and updated the records to reflect Emma as the sole legal owner. Emma thought the nightmare was finally over until she received a furious phone call that evening. Patricia was screaming, accusing Emma of stealing her inheritance and embarrassing her in front of the cemetery officials. Emma calmly explained that Grandma Eleanor had made the decision herself long before her death. Patricia refused to believe it, insisting that Emma had manipulated the attorney and forged documents. She threatened to take Emma to court and prove that everything belonged to her. Emma quietly answered that she welcomed the lawsuit because the truth was supported by legal evidence. Patricia slammed the phone down without another word. Within a week, official court papers arrived. Patricia had filed a legal challenge claiming Eleanor had been mentally incapable of making changes to her estate. Although Emma knew the accusations were false, the lawsuit reopened painful family wounds. Friends and distant relatives began calling, asking why mother and daughter were fighting over a cemetery plot. Patricia told everyone that Emma cared more about a grave than about helping her own struggling mother. Some relatives believed Patricia's version and criticized Emma for refusing to compromise. Others remembered Eleanor's wisdom and encouraged Emma to stand her ground. Through it all, Emma continued visiting the grave every Sunday, placing fresh flowers beside the headstone and quietly asking her grandmother for strength. The day of the hearing finally arrived. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Patricia confidently claimed Eleanor had been confused during her final months and argued that Emma had manipulated an elderly woman into changing the estate. But one by one, the attorney, Eleanor's physician, the witnesses who signed the documents, and even the cemetery caretaker testified. They all described Eleanor as intelligent, determined, and completely aware of every decision she made. Then the attorney presented something Patricia had never expected, a video recording made on the day Eleanor signed the documents. Looking directly into the camera, Eleanor smiled gently and said, "If you're watching this, someone has challenged my wishes. Let me make this perfectly clear. I am of sound mind, and I choose to leave my burial plot to Emma because I know she will protect it with love. My daughter Patricia has repeatedly shown that money means more to her than family. This decision is mine and mine alone." The courtroom fell into complete silence. Patricia's confidence disappeared instantly as every excuse she had prepared collapsed before undeniable evidence. Even the judge paused for a moment before continuing the proceedings, knowing the outcome had suddenly become unmistakably clear. The judge carefully reviewed every piece of evidence before delivering the final decision. Patricia's claim was dismissed entirely, and the court ruled that Eleanor had been mentally competent when she signed her final estate documents. The judge declared that Emma was the sole legal owner of the burial plot and that Patricia had no authority to sell, transfer, or interfere with it in any way. He also criticized Patricia for bringing a lawsuit based on false allegations and ordered her to pay the legal costs Emma had been forced to endure. Patricia sat silently at the defense table, her face pale with disbelief. The confidence she had carried into the courtroom had completely vanished. For the first time in years, she realized that greed had not only cost her the case but had also destroyed the trust of nearly everyone who had supported her. Emma did not celebrate the victory. Instead, she quietly thanked her attorney and walked outside into the warm afternoon sunlight, feeling more relieved than triumphant. News of the court's decision spread quickly throughout the town. Many neighbors who had believed Patricia's version of the story apologized to Emma after learning the truth. They admired the courage she had shown in protecting her grandmother's final wishes despite enormous emotional pressure. Even several relatives who had criticized Emma admitted they had judged her unfairly. They remembered Eleanor as a generous, compassionate woman and realized she would never have changed her estate without a serious reason. Patricia, however, found herself increasingly isolated. Friends who had once sympathized with her began keeping their distance after hearing about the courtroom evidence and the video recording. She discovered that rebuilding a damaged reputation was much harder than destroying one. A few days later, Emma visited her grandmother's grave carrying fresh white lilies, the same flowers Eleanor had loved throughout her life. The cemetery was peaceful, with sunlight filtering gently through the branches of the old oak tree. Emma carefully cleaned the headstone, polished the engraved letters, and arranged the flowers beside the memorial. Then she sat quietly on the nearby bench, holding Eleanor's handwritten letter once more. She smiled through tears as she reread the closing lines, "Love is measured by what we protect, not by what we possess." Those words now carried even greater meaning. Emma realized that her grandmother had left behind far more than a burial plot. She had left a lesson about integrity, loyalty, and standing firm even when doing so meant standing alone. As Emma prepared to leave, the elderly cemetery caretaker approached with a gentle smile. He thanked her for honoring Eleanor's memory and handed her a small wooden box that had been stored in the cemetery office for several years. Eleanor had instructed him to give it to Emma only after the dispute over the grave had been resolved. Curious, Emma carefully opened the box. Inside she found an old silver locket containing a faded photograph of herself as a little girl sitting beside her grandmother on a park bench. Beneath the photograph was another folded note written in Eleanor's elegant handwriting. It read, "If you are reading this, you prove that kindness is not weakness. You protected what mattered without becoming cruel. That is the greatest inheritance I could ever leave you." Emma closed the locket and held it close to her heart, overwhelmed with gratitude. Over the following months, Emma decided to create a memorial garden around Eleanor's resting place. With permission from the cemetery, she planted roses, lavender, and white daisies, transforming the quiet corner into one of the most beautiful areas in the cemetery. Visitors often stopped to admire the flowers, and many left inspired by the story they had heard about the granddaughter who refused to let greed erase her grandmother's legacy. Emma also established a small scholarship in Eleanor's name for local students pursuing careers in nursing, honoring the profession Eleanor had dedicated her life to. Every year, scholarship recipients placed a bouquet of white lilies on Eleanor's grave as a gesture of thanks. Patricia eventually tried to contact Emma several times, hoping to repair their fractured relationship. Although Emma listened politely, she understood that forgiveness did not require forgetting the pain that had been caused. She wished her mother well but chose to maintain healthy boundaries until genuine change was proven through actions rather than words. Standing beside her grandmother's grave one final time that autumn, Emma looked at the peaceful memorial surrounded by blooming flowers and whispered, "I kept my promise, Grandma." A cool breeze rustled through the oak leaves above as sunlight illuminated the polished headstone. Emma smiled softly, believing that while money could buy almost anything in life, it could never purchase love, honor, or the priceless peace that comes from doing what is right.